Force on Force features the largest and strongest outdoor military organization in the country. These are the men and women who make it possible to enjoy the freedom to hunt and fish. It is with great pride that we bring you Force on Force podcast, coming to you from the Force on Force Talk.
Hey, welcome to the Force on Force podcast. I'm your host, Shawn Dalrymple. We were off at Fishing for Freedom in 2024 last week. It was a lot of fun to be down there at Lake Belton, Fort Cavaso with the soldiers and veterans taking them out. But we're back. We're a lot of places. Hunting's been going on a couple of weeks. Some places are getting ready to kick off. I wanted someone I've been trying to get on the podcast for a little bit, and is the guy who works on my bow, and really one of the first people I kind of met when I moved to Kentucky and started looking. So Eric Cissell.
Hey, Shawn.
Is a bow tech at Bardstown Mills. How you doing?
Doing well. Glad to be here.
I just thought it'd be kind of cool. Other than, like, I'm just going to tell you, like, just a great person to meet. And it was one of the first people that really kind of made me feel at home here in Kentucky. But he has a wealth of knowledge when it talks about archery hunting, and just when you go to the shop there, he makes everybody feel welcome. A little quick story. I have an Army buddy that does some guiding for some people in some parts of Kentucky. And he asked me if you were the one that worked on my bow, because...
Oh, was that right?
Yeah, because he had several clients that were in that I don't know their names, but your reputation kind of precedes yourself.
Awesome. We'll take it. Absolutely.
But so, but we also going to talk a little bit about your recent elk trip and stuff like that. So, kind of introduce yourself. I've introduced you a little bit, kind of.
So I'm Eric Cissell. I work at Bardstown Mills. I've been a bow tech there for about 13 years. Small background. I've been in the outdoors since I was a kid. Back in 2011, I was approached by a good friend who they were starting the new store, and he approached me about possibly coming and running the archery shop. And I'm like, yeah, man, sure. I brushed it off like no big deal. Nobody gets to do what they want to do in life, joking. About 6 months later, he reached back out and he's like, hey, man, like, I'm serious about doing this. Are you interested? And I was like, well, definitely, I just need you to understand that you approached me. I didn't come to you looking for a job, But here we are 13 years later, man. It's been a learning curve the whole way, despite what you think going into something, there's always tons of room for learning, along the way. Archery equipment changes about every 10 minutes, so you're constantly trying to keep up with it. And, it's been a really cool ride. I've met a lot of cool people, a lot of famous people, a lot of down-to-earth people just like myself, or what I consider. Yeah, man, it's been pretty cool.
I think that's what's kind of cool. When I first met you, it was that very down-to-earth kind of mentality. I think to me, that's what's important out
right
there. I think that's what matters.
Well, at the end of the day, man, it doesn't pay to sell somebody just archery equipment. First and foremost, I don't do this for the money, and I'm just going to make that very clear. Getting people in the right direction and letting them enjoy what they're doing and the time that they spend doing it. My job is to try to eliminate a lot of the headache that comes along with the trials and tribulations of what they're trying to do by means of failures that I have had, trying to say, all right, look, this works here, this may not work, or this is what I found. Kind of give people a lot of general direction to kind of chew it up and digest that and what works for them, but just initially just trying to save people a lot of headache.
Yeah, I know. So that, that's what I kind of saw. When I've been in the store, I've seen that just little things where you've had people come in with, like, to them, it seemed like a complex issue. And you're like, hey, just do this little thing right here and it'll fix what you're doing. And I think that's kind of key when you talk about it. Just that little bit of knowledge and things that you learned.
Yeah, just like I said, the little tweaks, little quirks of just the smallest thing that, like you said, might be something seems like a major problem to somebody that just really isn't that big of a deal, But I have failed a lot going into this, and just even prior to being in this, everything I'm doing is based on experience that I have earned. Yeah.
I know when I came in there, I'm looking to get a new bow, and you're responsible for just setting my bow up. And we actually killed a deer with it on a TV show this year. And so it's getting ready to air on the Sportsman Channel. So I'm pretty excited to share that. And it's not a huge buck, but it's actually the buck it's really the original bucks that was before the property was high fenced there in Texas. And it's a very hard buck to kill. Like sometimes it's not so much
about the antlers, right? It's about the age and what that sucker has seen in his everyday to day, and they adapt and overcome, and whitetail are smart.
Yeah. And so it was kind of cool that we took a boat from here in Bardstown, Kentucky. Yeah. We took it to Texas to kill a deer that was pretty elusive, and they couldn't get a hold of him. And I think we killed him with we killed him with not a lot of time left to spare when we were on this hunt. So it's pretty cool. We want to talk a little bit because you got to go on a pretty unique experience here recently. I know it was pretty much a bucket list trip for you to go
Absolutely.
elk hunt. I want you to kind of tell that story and getting to go do.
So August the 30th, we left Kentucky and headed to New Mexico. Good friend of mine allowed me to get my foot in the door with a family who's got some private land, and me and two of my good friends hightailed it out of here. And this was my first elk hunt. So, the knowledge is minimal. You can only feel like you're so good until you get there, and then it really humbles you. So there's about 100-year-old cabin that's on the property. And when I say cabin, I mean 4 walls, a wood floor, and a leaky roof. With that being said, the first couple of days were a little bit trying just because, there's mice in it, there's flies. It's just not standard living, so to speak. Anyway, after about day 3 of hiking around and averaging probably 6 to 7 miles a day, my care for that kind of subsided, and it was kind of like a second home. When I crawled into that sleeping bag, man, it was almost like being in my own bed, but not really. I was fortunate enough on day 6 of a 10-day hunt to have this elk come in with some cows. I had a calf come in and bed down closer than the rest of the herd. When the cows come in, we had me and a friend of mine, he was sitting off about 50 yards, and we were kind of working some cow calls. They come through this meadow and they're kind of checking things out. And when they didn't see what they were looking for, the source of the call, the cows kind of lost interest, started easing back off. Well, this one lone cow was she was bedded, and the bull comes straight over to her, nudges her, gets her up. She kind of relocates to the herd, and he stands there broadside for, a little bit too long. So I took a range on him, and I'd rather not disclose how far I shot him, just for the simple fact of just know that I practice this stuff. And, it's kind of the cards I was dealt. I've got about a 20+ mile an hour crosswind, which made it extra hard to hold on target. I get settled in, and I turn my first arrow loose, and I missed. I absolutely missed. Now, elevation was good, but that wind drift caught my arrow, and it sailed to the left. He never batted an eye. I was able to pull out another arrow, went right back into my motions, got into my stops. Everything was feeling good, but I had to play my windage a little bit, so I moved up into his chest cavity a little bit further than I would normally aim and sent the second arrow and popped him. So he turns, faces away probably another 20 yards, and he's hunkered up. Like, you can tell he's hurt, and his ears are pinned back. And I thought, man, I've got to get another arrow in him. I had an idea. It was probably liver, stomach area. It was just a little bit further back than what I would have liked, but I knew it was going to be fatal. So arrow number 3. And of course, this time I'm already jazzed up pretty good, and I've taken a lot of whitetail, mule deer, a lot of different species, and, all of it gives me a rise, but this elk was different, man. So arrow number 3, I get settled in, I ranged him, adjust my sights, accommodate for that, and I send it. And lo and behold, I missed him again by about 6 inches to the left. So I'm like, bro, get your stuff together. Arrow number 4, I reload, draw back, get it settled in, move over about 10 inches to my right, play my windage, and send it. And I run it right in the backside of him, and he took out. So I run about 100 yards to this rise to where I could see. Of course, he's gone. And I was able to pick up a couple of his cows, and they had already moved about 340 yards roughly. And they're looking back like, where you at? Where you at? They never regained or regrouped with each other. I watched the cows go off after about 10 minutes, and I said, he's hurt. So me and my friend eased down to the path we thought he went in, and I located a couple spots of blood, so we backed out. I said, if it's back in the liver area, I said, I would like to give him 6 or 7 hours just to be on the safe side. So we did, went back to the cabin. We ate some lunch, took a nap. And of course, my excitement's getting the best of me. I'm like, y'all, come on, let's do this. So we get out about 2 hours before dark. We find blood. We follow it for probably 100 yards, and then nothing. It was gone. And then I'm tracking his hoof prints with the dew claws about every 6 foot where he's kind of still running. Then he hits a canyon, or the base of a canyon where it's a rock bottom. And then once it hits that, there's nothing. And then there's trails that go any direction. It's all oak brush ranging from 2 foot to 15 foot. And it's the labyrinth of maze of trails that I'm just not used to here. I mean, we've got some thick terrain, but this was just different. So it was getting dark, and I told the boys, I said, let's just back out. We'll go back to the cabin. We'll get up in the morning. You guys go hunt. That way I don't knock you out of a morning hunt. I'll go in by myself, and I turn my tracker on my Onyx, and then I'm literally grid searching and painting section by section, just trying to eliminate where I don't need to go. So I cross the head of this canyon is what I'm going to call it, because it drops down pretty steep beyond where I was at. And I start combing back and forth. I'd go about 200 yards. I'd turn and I'd come back, skip over about 50 feet and go back another 200 yards. And I literally just painted my way all the way to this point. And I got to this meadow, man. And I stopped. I took my backpack off. I grabbed a bottle of water. I drank it, and I'm frustrated. I'm like, man, I blew this, Went from the highest of the high to the lowest of the low, and I'm down on myself. I'm thinking about all this practice I do, all the stuff that I do to prep for these kind of situations, and I feel like I blew it. So having a poor me moment, finished my bottle of water, throwed it in the backpack, put my pack on, grabbed my bow, and I said, I'm going to give it 15 or 20 more minutes. Now, mind you, on my tracker, I've already been 4.1 miles back and forth. So I feel like I've about exhausted it, and I thought, man, I just messed it up. So I literally squeezed through this little opening in the oak brush. You could tell where a faint trail went through amongst all the tons of trails that are there. And I wiggle through this, and man, I make it out into this little bitty opening, 25 yards probably from where I was just at. And boom, there he is. He's laying there stone dead. So I knew at this point, I'm 42, and I've been dreaming of this hunt since I was 12. So just 30 years in the making, right? And I knew the moment I went over there and I put my hand on that elk, that was done. So I put my bow down, took my backpack off, and man, I'm not going to lie, and there's no shame in the game, but I had a pretty good little cry. I'm not going to lie, man. It was pretty emotionally rough, this roller coaster. And, like I said, I've taken a lot of animals, man. Nothing hit me quite as hard as that on a spiritual level. It was just really cool. And unless you're there, you can't replicate that. So my cup is full, and I go to reach down. So I get my stuff together. I'm trying to just get myself cleaned up and just presentable. So I go to reach for my two-way radio, and it's gone. It hangs on my bino harness. We all had them. So I'm scurrying around. I'm trying to get cell phone service. Everything's in SOS mode. And I'm like, golly, what am I going to do now? So we had actually backed off on the bugling because the elk that we were encountering they would get so close, then they would round their cows up and take them away from us. So we had switched tactics. The only thing I had left was my big bugle tube to sound off. So I knew my buddies were within a half a mile or so. So I thought, you know what? It's now or never. So I pulled that tube out. I ripped 3 bugles right in a row and then just sat there, right? Well, it took about 20 minutes. Then I started hearing some mewing, and I started mewing back. And it was my buddies. They had heard me, and one of them told the other, he said, man, he found that bull. He would not make that noise if he didn't find it. He said, so let's go. 15, 20 minutes goes by, and my buddies are there to help me start the process, man. Absolutely awesome.
Yeah, that's a cool story. I think I'm hearing it for the first time from you. I mean, I saw the pictures and saw you were super excited to share that. That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
The trials and tribulations that you went through. Because people, I mean, everybody sees on TV what happened, but I'm going to let everybody know a little secret. what we show on TV is not necessarily what
I understand. Yeah.
what always happens to kind of clean it up.
Yeah.
So,
I wish I could say it was a perfect everything, man, but honestly, just everything leading up to it, step by step, like, I don't know that I could have wrote it out on a piece of paper any better, man, for a great outcome,
Well, I don't think I understand it because those are a lot longer shots out there that you have to take that typically your whitetail shot that you're going to take.
Absolutely.
And so understanding that and having, I'm not hunted out there, but I can tell you being deployed in Afghanistan and places like that, when you get on those mountains, you start dealing with wind and it starts affecting you.
Yes.
And so having to compensate for that, all those things that kind of go into it, those matter. So all that stuff that played into it, that's what makes it an incredible story to kind of tell.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's a lot of that sappy stuff that a lot of people want to leave out, But hell, there's no shame in my game, man.
But that's the cool part of the story because that's they always talk about the highest of highs and the lowest of lows, and it's that.
Raw emotion.
The raw emotion. You think you're like, man, just when you think you're not going to find it, and you find it, you find that elk, and that once in a lifetime trip you've been dreaming of.
Exactly.
I think that's an incredible part of the hunt. And anybody that does that, it's like you never. That's why I tell people, like, for me, and whether it's hunting or fishing, I talk about this a lot that. Where I've been deployed down range and the things that I do, it was an adrenaline rush and and it's a drug. And so fishing and hunting has been the only way to really replicate that.
Absolutely.
That ability, that spiritual connection, because that dopamine high that you get from that.
Yeah.
Is unlike anything that you could ever.
Maybe if you robbed a bank and got away with it, like, I don't even know how to put it into words, And for the non-hunters or my wife or people that, just don't understand why we punish ourselves to do this stuff, it's just different. The outcome, the feeling, just everything. But, when I got up that morning, I had slept all night thinking about this. And on my way up the side of this, and I'm going to call it a mountain range, but they're smaller. But on my way up, I kind of said a few prayers and I told the Lord, I said, I would really like to be brutalized by packing out a lot of elk meat today, and kind of went on about my business. And then when it all come down to it, you've got this massive animal laying there and your work begins then. It ain't, I had put in 35 miles up to that point on my feet in just a few days. But then once we start quartering it out, caping it out, and getting everything taken care of, that's when the work begins and you're playing beat the clock. The sun, it's getting up towards of 80 degrees in the day. So it was a very precise process that you had to go to be able to salvage your meat and, not make any mistakes. So.
Pretty cool story. So, especially to do it with your bow. I mean, that's on my bucket list to go do it, kill an elk with my bow. And that's really, I know that's on a lot of, and it's not an easy task to do because it's so much harder to get them closer. You got to go earlier in the year to do it when and
the weather's decent. They're migrating patterns. It's a totally different animal than the whitetail that we're used to. And I'm by no means an expert on it. A lot of luck played into that, and I failed a lot in those days, like miserably, to kind of redirect and put the pieces of the puzzle back together and kind of get back in with it,
Yes. So that's good. Cool. So kind of shifting gears back to what you do, bow hunting or archery setup wise. So let's talk about like the bow setup process and what you kind of go through when you talk, whether it's a beginning bow hunter, an experienced, or even a competition guy that comes into the story,
So usually my first question to people, and I tell them, I said, y'all, look, it's not a trick question. Everything revolves around a budget. What kind of monies do you want to spend? I said, and I promise you there is no wrong as long as it's reasonable, because you know what new bows kind of cost, and it just gives me a direction to go. So if it's a young lad or somebody that comes in that, are in that growing state, there's a lot of bows on the market that will allow for adjustable draw lengths, a lot of range and poundages, and overall mass weight of certain bows, that people are able to hold up and kind of jokingly manhandle. If you can't hold the weight of the bow, you're not going to do well. So I just try to size everybody up based on what their physical strengths are, And then if I've got a guy that comes in and it's like, hey man, no budget, I'll never try to oversell somebody on what they need to be doing, because the fact is all archery equipment set up properly will harvest animals. Some just do it with a little more let off, with a little more speed, a little more gear, gadgets, some modern type stuff that extends your range out beyond the typical 3, 4, or 5 pin. Yeah.
I always say the bow kind of chooses the archer, not the other way around,
Yep.
And I think that's what I think I see when I see you do it. I think that's what I kind of see. You don't try and force somebody into something that they don't really particularly need, because you get something, that you don't really need. You're not going to be comfortable. You're not going to be comfortable on the hunt, and that's what's important.
Yep.
I'm comfortable spending a lot of money on a bow because I've been doing it for quite a while.
Oh yeah.
And but even then, last year, I know we talked about, like, I was looking at between the aluminum version versus the carbon version. And for me, I just couldn't tell a big enough difference between the two. I actually felt that the draw cycle was better with the aluminum version versus.
I get that both ways. I really do.
And it really comes down to the personal preference.
Exactly. And for somebody to go in with an open mind, I tell people, go shoot other brands.
Yeah.
And there's going to be one that when you shoot it, you're going to step back and be like, oh, wow. And even if you're not purchasing today, you're going to leave the shop thinking about that high on your list, but the bow typically will pick them, for others that just, like to bow hunt to fill some time, may not be in that mindset to spend, flagship pricing. Yeah. And that's okay. Whatever it takes to get you in the outdoors, that's my biggest thing, because you can take a $450 grow with you bow. I could take any one in my shop right now and set those up for my liking and harvest deer with them. So there's no wrong in it. It's just how you want to finish your race.
Yeah, I think that's important. I think that's what kind of sets you apart from other guys out there that are doing it. And I think that's the comfort level, especially I've seen like kids come in and shop, not call them kids, they're 16 to 20 to 24 years old. You could sell them probably anything in the world, but that's not the way you kind of do it with that.
At the end of the day, I've got to sleep at night. I'm not in it. Let me just say this, you've got to make money to keep your lights on. You got to make money to be able to kind of do this lifestyle. But for the folks that think that you're making millions of dollars, you can just go ahead and write that off right now. At the end of the day, man, I don't do it for the money. I actually quit a good job years ago to come and do what I love, but it comes at a price. Man, I'm just going to say I'm 100, 200 years too late. Like, what the type of living and the type of person that I would like to be to a lot of people in today's society is just kind of like, what's the matter with him, But that's just where I'm at.
So if we talk like an entry level person, so like, let's just say, what kind of recommendation for like a basic bow accessory? Like, first thing I always say, whether it's bow hunting, fishing, whatever, I do this with electronics all the time on the fishing side. Where I'm like, what are you trying to do with it? We know that's always going to be the first question, but there's always some basic things advice that we can kind of give to those guys, like when they're wanting to get into it, what is some.
Well, at the end of the day, your budget has to suffice what you're doing, and that's where your pro shops come in. Any reputable bow shop that has a good understanding about how things work and function, that's where they need to go, and not taking anything away from the bigger box stores. But, when you get that one-on-one service, it's easier to pick up on things and learn the right habits than just taking a bow and having to deal with it. Whether the peep sight's too high or the draw length's a little long or a little short, or you're shooting an underspined arrow. There's just so many factors that can make or break a good setup. So relying on a pro shop of some sort to kind of guide you in that right direction with good knowledge, man, it's invaluable. And we always had a gentleman here local that he's since retired, and everybody bought their archery equipment on him. I'm that kid that when I get something, the instructions always go in the trash. Like, I want to see the pictures, you know what I mean? And then I dissect things down. And maybe that's not the right way to be, but I've always been hands-on. So that's kind of what led me into all this. I just always like to do my own stuff. And don't get me wrong, I've messed a lot of my stuff up, learning the hard way, but it all come full circle. And it's been a really good gig so far.
Yeah. So I do some of the stuff on my own, and just as much as I've had to travel, that was kind of what we had to kind of I've had to deal with that.
Absolutely. So let's face it, if you're out west, and I'm just going to say, and you're 3-4 hours from a local pro shop or anybody that can help you, I mean, something simple as putting a D-loop, back on, making any kind of adjustments like that. I think there is a very big need for common knowledge when you get in that position. I still have folks that'll come in for things that obviously are not that big of a deal to me, but will make or break what they're doing. And just like I said, a couple little tools in your tool pouch, some extra D-loop material, D-loop pliers, wax. I mean, just little things that 50-cent item that would cost you a bunch if you absolutely had to have it,
Well, I mean, it's a lot of money if you can't get it done anywhere, because it may cost you your whole entire hunting trip when you think about it. I mean, like I went as far as a couple of years ago. I even ended up with a bow press because there's times when when I need to get twist out of my string and things
absolutely.
Like that, where like that's we bring it down in the military with skill level 1 task. I mean, where more advanced stuff I'm bringing to you to get to work on it, get the bow balanced.
I'm with you.
Things like but those skill level 1 tasks, I want to be able to do it myself. Or someone else, that might be a little bit more intimidating. But I've had to learn and adapt and figure out what I want to do, because that's a big important thing to me, especially as much as I shoot and and travel and stuff. I'll come home and I'll tell you this, with my sight, there's not a trip that I don't come home or go somewhere that I don't have to adjust it, because just riding around the truck. Even in a padded case.
Yes.
It's just off a little bit,
Murphy's Law. If one little thing can go wrong, man, it will set you back 100%. But just like I said, a little bit of learning. And, I've got a lot of customers that, when they ask me how to do something, I'm going right straight to it and let them get all the information they can. That way, if they ever have to apply it in that kind of situation, they're not going to be stranded.
Now, your advanced guys, when they come in, they kind of know what they want, don't they?
They do.
Yeah, so.
Whether it's social media or, I've shot this certain brand bow my whole life. Like, this is what I want. And that kind of guy gives me a solid direction to go. There again, I get them shooting some of these bows. The bows will pick them. And then, everything for me starts at the arrow rest. Once I set draw length, get an idea of kind of where your poundage is, and then I start building that bow up from that point.
Yeah, so those guys are kind of know what they want. They're putting an order in, what they kind of going from there. I think the other thing you do really cool, and this is something that I've talked about in the past. So switching kind of off the bow, setup thing, is you really. Some of the things I've picked up from you being at the shop is around food plot discussions. And that's what I love about when I do get to come around. And I had a lot of traveling, so I don't get to hang around as much as I like to. But some things I learned from you was about food plot discussion. So when I talked about a previous podcast, Eric is the one that I talk about where I learned about the no-till drill and about where to go get it.
Oh, yeah. It's extension office. Yeah, that thing is invaluable.
Right. Extension office or wherever. And it was like that. I wish that we had known about that previously. We, in fact, picked one up last weekend for our property down in Alabama.
Absolutely.
To put the food plots in down there.
Yeah, a lot of people are not aware of that. But yeah, you contact your county extension office, and a lot of them have one of those drills that I think here in town, I want to say it's like $8 or $10 an acre. I mean, it's not overly priced. I mean, considering having to go out and buy that $20,000 piece of equipment or more to plant a couple of acres, man, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, I think I guess that's some of the cool stuff you hang around an archery shop. It's not for you, but it's for somebody. You get all that knowledge of people coming in there, and they'll share that knowledge with you. I think that's what's really cool about, the hunting industry and the sport itself. You're going to pick up little tidbits here and there, and we're always sharing things, and you don't know what you don't know, right?
Yeah. And it's wild because, you talk to 10 different people, and 10 different people bring something a little bit different to the table. And then, you absorb all that information, juggle it, and then apply what applies to you to your own hunting. And man, if all you've got to role model after is yourself, you're pretty much doomed. As far as I'm concerned, I've learned a lot and talking with guys, and they're like, well, I done, this little bit here. And it's like, oh, wow, I never really thought about that. Just little things that you pick up. It's pretty cool, man. And not all brains are the exact same. So everybody just has something to offer. And, I've learned from a lot of different people over the years. I've got 2 uncles in my family, one on each side of my family. One's a traditional bow hunter. One is a more of the rifle guy. But I've picked up and learned so much from these guys that's that was my imprint of why I'm even here today, so I can take little pieces of both of their worlds and translate it into my own. And then, of course, I'm doing my own thing beyond what they've done.
Right. So that's what's really cool. So just as we kind of start to wrap it up, just like, you have any general archery or hunting, tips, things that you can think of that
Oh man,
listeners that it would be important? For us, it's all about a lot of bow hunting up here. I as much as I travel, it's funny because the last 2 states I've lived in, Missouri and Kentucky, it's been bow hunting because we just don't have a big rifle season up here. But I love to bow hunt anyway. So
absolutely.
But a lot of places, you just it's different places.
The biggest thing for me is, as a kid growing up, my grandfather owned a roofing company, and I'd work for him for side money on my summer breaks and whatnot to get some money. And then, I was going to the pawn shop and I'm buying, whatever cool bow they had to offer at the time, and of course, then everything had a 30-inch draw. So, I'm shooting something that's 2 inches longer, and I learned a lot of bad habits with equipment that doesn't fit. So my biggest advice to anybody that's trying to get into this is go to a pro shop, talk to somebody with some knowledge, and actually get custom fitted to a bow that fits you. And it's no different than the clothes that you wear. A guy who wears large doesn't need a 2X anything, and it's the same way with a bow. If you're a 28-inch draw, roughly, you're not needing a 30-inch bow. So all that stuff tailored to you makes all the difference in the world. And your accuracy will suffer for that if things are not on point.
Yeah, I think that, and I don't think that just applies to bow hunting. I think that's
life.
Life. I mean, rifle hunting, anything like that.
Yes.
I mean, you got to have the right tool for the right job. I talk about that with fishing all the time with high school kids. I always when I talk to the parents, and I'm like, I'm not saying go get the most expensive out there, but go buy the right tool for the right. First of all, I always tell, go buy them a good rain suit. Because there ain't nothing more miserable than being on the water.
Absolutely.
When you're talking to a high school kid, being more miserable, being in the water and being wet.
Yep.
2 is buy a good reel with some good brakes. It ain't got to be an expensive one, but it's got to have good brakes in it because that makes the right tool to fit what they're trying to do. There's nothing worse than having something, like you said, it doesn't fit or it doesn't work properly. And that's why I say, like, all those things. But I think it kind of hits on the fact that that local bow shop and how much, I'll just tell you, there was kind of moving here, not really knowing where everything is. It was kind of awesome to kind of find the bow shop there at Bardstown Mills and kind of that atmosphere, because I think that local shop is really a key, makes you feel more comfortable and how those things. I mean, it's not just a bow shop. I get my deer corn there.
Food plot. They've got a lot of different little stuff.
They got a lot of stuff. And so for me, it was kind of a deal, and that really is important, especially as much as I travel and I don't get to. So, because when you could come to a new place, it's that home feel, and it really made me feel important.
Well, that means a lot to us. I'm not a big bow shop, man. I am a one-man show. I'm the judge, jury, the executioner, and the secretary. So I'm torn in all kinds of different directions at all times. But at the end of the day, I want to treat people more than a customer. Like I said, it's not about the money. Obviously you got to make it to generate it to exist. But at the end of the day, I want people to get the right information. I want them to enjoy themselves, and they're going to have enough hardships, missing a deer or wounding a deer and stuff that's coming. But I want to try to get them as far along as I can. And, at the end of the day, I want everybody to have the right information. Yeah, that's all I can say. I want them to have the best possible experience that they can. Like I said, they're going to fail, just like we all do.
But that's part of hunting. I mean,
it is.
They call it. We always say they call it catching and not fishing. They call it killing and not hunting.
Yes, exactly.
They're always going to fail. I mean, that's the part of it. It's the failures that make the
yes. It makes you stronger. It makes you grow, and it's definitely going to let you know what's not working.
It makes the success story more memorable too.
Absolutely.
When you do it. I mean, that's what makes it the most important part of this. Is I always say we take out the actual catching the fish, or it's or killing the animal. It's the actual story that leads up to it.
Right.
It's putting the pieces together.
Yeah, absolutely. Your hunt or your kill or your shot or you reeling in that fish, it's a small piece of that whole entire ride, which completes it. But there's a whole lot more leads up to that than just that one little piece. It's all about the memories and everything else. I love it.
Well, Eric, I appreciate you kind of hanging out with us on this and talking about I didn't know the whole story about the elk. And so I think it was cool to kind of share this. See, now you're going to get to share that story with everybody. And, and all that. So it's really cool. We enjoy getting to talk. We're about storytelling and tell that story and having you on the Force on Force podcast. And I appreciate you helping me out along the way and
absolutely
being able to do that. Hey guys, we're going to be next week. Got a really cool podcast. We're going to be with the guys at Lowrance. We're actually going to talk forward-facing sonar and talk about the changes that are in the outdoor industry with forward-facing sonar. So we're going to talk to 3 major circuits, bass, MPLF, and Major League Fishing, to talk about the decisions that were made to kind of what each one of them calls forward-facing sonar and how all that's going to play out. And just really how Lowrance has played into all that, and as far as like not just from a tournament angler, but also how you can use it as an everyday angler out there. So I think it's really cool. Jeremiah Clark, who's been really integral part in some of the design parts and big part of what Lowrance does. And we're really excited to have him come on next week, and we're going to share that with the listeners. Hey, if you want to know more about Army bass, duck, buck, or hog, or redfish, go to forceonforcetv.com, and we appreciate you listening. Cool.
Thanks for listening to the Force on Force podcast. Join us next time as we dive into more topics from the Force on Force talk. For more information or to learn how to join the organization, visit our website at forceonforcetv.com.